Hello, everybody. So this is going to be the first recording video. I plan on making more than one just because it seems like from the feedback I got from the forums and the questionnaire that it was kind of pretty evenly distributed. And I feel that putting everything into one may make it too long, and I don't want it to be too long, so we can have natural breaks into this. Or if you're looking for just a specific topic, this will make it easier. So this video right here, I will be going over labeling, formatting, and then also I will be going over merging. And finally, I'll go over some functions you can use in DataStet. DataStet. So when I mean DataStet, that means when we have, let's say, data, our base we're going to make, and then we'll have like the sum function we've seen and the divide. So we'll be going over that. But first, I'll start with just the merging. So I'll start with that. So I will have input variable, so var, which will be a characteristic, num, and then year. And then data lines, which is the same as cards for those who we can use data lines or cards. So I'll have x, number 1, year 2020, y, number 1, year 2019, and then z, number 2, year 2018. Semicolon and run. I will run this. Actually, I'll name this actually db_ones for our first database. So here we go. And we see it's created. So we have our variable, our num, and then our year. And then I will create a second database with a similar. Then I'll say pay amount. And pay amount will be the amount they owe. 140, 100, 200. And we see we have a variable and then our payment amount. So of course we would need to sort everything beforehand, right? So we use proc sort data equals, I should have named this db2. So I'm going to rerun all this. So we would need to sort all of our variables, of course, before we run it. So our data was equal to our db1 and our db2. But since I created them in a sorted fashion, it doesn't really matter since I would just sort by our variable name, right? Since we were trying to merge. So we were now merge the two together. So we do that in a data step. So data db_merge, merge. This will be merge db1_1 and db2_2. Now I could add an in equals a or an in equals b here. And so by our var. Now this in equals 1 and in equals 2 would mean if there are incomplete observations, and I'll add that on next. But at this point, it doesn't really do anything, but I will still merge it together like this and show you guys how it looks. So now we have our three variables here. We have our num, year, and our payment amount. So this is what we will see as our variables here. Now this is the merge data set. And we see this adds our database 1 at the left, and then our database 2. So looking at that here, I have our db1 right here, and then our db2 right here. So that just merges the two on top of each other. And there's also another way called concatenation. So I'll do db_cat, then set db_1 and db_2, and then run. So this is also another way you could say of getting the two databases together. But this way, it just stacks the two on top of each other. So you see we have our XYZ and then our XYZ again. But we see that we have our missing values here and our missing values here for the values that don't exist in both data sets. So this is useful if we're just adding on. Let's say, remember when we had earlier, and I believe 2 sections ago, where we had our group 1 and then our group 2, and then we put the two groups together to find out our amounts there. But at that point, none of our data, or none of the observations were duplicates, we knew. So it was the easy way to do that. So that is for non-duplicates. I'll actually leave that in there. Case where duplicate names do not exist. So this would be not the case below. So the case below, we would need to use a merging, but let's say we had A, B, and C here, and then we could do that and it would be good. So now using our in equals, so I'll add another one. I'll add Q2 and then 2017. Now, if I only want complete observation, or observations that'll have all 4 of our variables, their variable, number, and year. So complete obs. I will add an if equals, or not, I don't need an equal, so I'll add an if A or if B. So we'll start with an if A just to see what that does. I'm going to need to run all of these. So we see here that it adds, oh, that is not the merged one. So there will be an error, my guess is. So 5 variables are not properly sorted in DV1. So we see that there is an, oh, yes, we need to sort since now the Q is out of order. So proc sort. So I will sort both of them. Data is equal to DB underscore 1, run. And then proc sort. Data is equal to DB underscore 2, and then run. And I also had a question on how do I write code faster? So or write it in a, oops, I forgot the by. So how do I write code faster? The whole point of writing code faster, the best way to do it is just to write more code. I know that sounds kind of silly or just probably not the answer most people are looking for. But the more you write code, the more you know the syntax. And the more you know the syntax, the easier it is to write code. So here we see now our database 1 has been sorted, and so is our database 2. So the only database that has changed has been database 1. So now we run this, and we see this does merge. But using our in equals A has all of our values that were in A, right? So that doesn't really work since we have this Q here that isn't in database 2. So I'm going to use the one that has all the observations I want, which is database 2, or is in equals B, and this has our XYZ here. So now I can work on our DB merge below. So now I'm going to use a function inside. So functions inside data step, or data steps. So I'll call this data temp, or data pay. I'll just call it that. So our set will be DB underscore merge. And I will add a variable called pay, or owed. This will equal to divide. I will divide our pay amount by our num. So we'll just consider we'll do this divided by num, and we're just going to see how this way goes first. I'll show both ways just so we can get a complete view of how this divide function works, since we know how the sum works. So we see here that we owed this now owed. As we see, it is just pay amount divided by our num. So our first 2 observations don't change, but our z, or the third observation, does change. So our divide, as we can see, we can change this to num comma payout, or pay amount, and we will see that it will now flip the 2, and we will get a decimal here. So the order of this is very important. So we see this is the numerator, and this is the denominator. So I'll flip that back so it's the way we want it, and I'll run this again. So here we go. We now have our owed. Now I'll add another one. So, and this will be using our, I'll just say this temp. So this will be set pay. So now I'm going to use our keep and drop for those who forget those. We still need to remember those. So I will drop now our pay amount. Since I don't really need the pay amount anymore, right? Because I have our owed amount. And I know if we have our number and our owed, I can get pay amount. And if I have number and pay amount, I can get owed, right? So I only need num in one of these, or I can have one of these in num. So I only need two of these three variables. So I'm going to drop the one that is not necessary, or one of them, because one of them is redundant. So I'm just dropping pay amount, and now I see that this is what we get. So now I'll add a label. So data temp, set temp, label, owed, equals amount, their owes to school, we'll say. And then I'll have format. So we'll be going over our format too. So I'll be formatting, actually I'll do this into two steps. So I'll do a run here just to show you that right here we've added our label. So we see our label doesn't do anything in this case, right? When we just run it. But once we add our proc print, so this is where we will see it. Data equals, I know earlier people were forgetting the data is equals, so let's not forget that on the final. So we're going to use our proc print. And we see this is what we have here. This doesn't have the label, right? So I will add our label statement, a label here, and run. Oop, that was in the wrong spot, right? We know we need our label to be right here. So I will add a noobs and then label right there. And then I'll go over what exactly each one does and just remind you. So now it adds our label up here. So this was the label we added over here, right? And then our noobs gets rid of our observation number. So it no longer has 1, 2, and 3. And just a quick refresher. We could have also had the label owed equals amount var owes school here also. But since we have it here, it would just be redundant. But we could also have it in our proc print statement. But remember, if we have this in our proc print statement, unless we have our output out, then it would not save this label into our data set. It will just have this as our output. So that's something important to remember, or something important to know what you could know on the quiz or the final and the quizzes. So knowing stuff like that will help you get quicker. And then I'll add the format here. So format, deleting our label since it was just redundant. So format our owed as $8.2. So we'll be running this, and this will add our $sign to the amount owed. And remember, the $sign counts as a spot. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need at least 7 spaces for our dollar amount. And if we have, let's say, 5.2, that it may turn out wrong when we do it. As we see with 5.2, we no longer have the $sign or the last decimal place for our dollar. So making sure we have the correct amount in our dollar statement is very important to know. So that is good. So I think I've gone over now our labeling, formatting, merging, and we've gone over some functions we could use in the data step. And we could, so what else should we go over for this step? So I guess I'll go over some more of the formatting. So we have dollar, and then we could also have, let's say we have, I will change our num or our var to uppercase 4 dot, and just 4 dot just because we know that it is important. You were trying to use a numeric value. So we'll just use that. we've used uppercase before. Okay, I for some reason cannot get the syntax for uppercase proper. Uppercase. But we'll just forget. Oh, never mind. So we're just going to forget about that right now. But there's also uppercase. We've used before. We've also used lowercase. We've also used, what is it, comma. And remember, if for comma, if we don't have enough spaces, it will do the 1.06 times e to the 10 it would do. If we don't end up with enough of our, if we don't give it enough spaces, so make sure we have enough for our comma, because this way it could round the number to an incorrect amount. And then we might have gone over a couple more. And of course, we know some of our other statements are sum. And then we could also use our plus. So we'll have num1 plus num2. And the difference between the two there's a difference between these two. Now, if you guys remember the difference between the two sums above is taking into account missing values. So if there's a missing value when we do our num1 plus num2, we know that this will not work. But if we use our sum function right here, it will work. So that's also the same thing here. We could have used for our divide, we could have just used the divide symbol. But of course, if there was a missing value, there would have been an error, or an error in our statement above. And that would be not good. And I'll add one more thing. So I'll do proc means for this one. So I'll add the proc means data equals just temp. So we will do by fodder run. So some of the things we can get here, we know our basic. We will just use our basic one to start off with. So we see our by breaks up each and every variable, our variable x, our variable y, and our variable z here. And we see every single thing. We have our num, our year, and our ode amount. And it also gives us our label for our ode. But the main things we see are the observations about n, the mean, the standard deviation. Since there's only one observation for each, there is no standard deviation, the minimum, and then the maximum, which are the same in this case. So those are our 5 basics. These are important to know. You may get knowing that there are 5 basic outputs are good to know. And then we could have our class var, and I'll add a variable ode here. So this will change it. So just having the class, we'll see what the class does that we've seen before, and I showed in the last video. The class groups all of our variables together. So now all of our variables are together. Now we're just looking at the amount owed, as we see here from the analysis variable, in is owed, amount owed variable to the school. So we have owed, and then the label for owed right here, if you're wanting that. And then we still have our 5. Now, if I wanted to just delete our variable there, I will run this. And we see that it still does the same thing. So I'll out that back. But we see it just doesn't only do the same thing once we delete our ode. It also adds in our num and year, but we know that doesn't change anything. So now we have our, I only want to look at the mean. I will add mean up there. And we see now we have our mean. Another function is sum. And this is our sum right here of the number, but that will be just the sum says 1. And then we could have output out. And then we'll just need a name. So we'll call this new. Then mean equals mean of x comma y comma z. Oop, and I need our comma. We'll run this. This might come up with an error since I haven't really practiced this. It does not have any columns. So I will just run it with just a mean. And we will see that how this shows out. Mean equals average num. And we see that there's our sum, and then our output data. This is our new. So this right here is our work.new, the one we just made. So here, this adds our type and our frequency. And then we have our average number here. And those are the 4. And we have our average number only because I have our mean statement here. And this is, I have said, label it as average num. Not the best number since we know this is just our average payout. And we see right here, this is our variable with no name. So this is all of the variables combined. So this is the average of the 3 variables. So this is the average of our 140 and our 2 100s. So that's good to know. And of course, working with this, we can just get it so we can just have this show up or just these. It depends on what we put next to this. So we've gone over class, we've gone over by, we've gone over sum. There's also other functions we could have here. Let's say Q1. This is just the lower 25th percentile, so we could go over this, all of those. And then we could have P99, which is the 99th percentile. So if you're using, let's say, a bigger data set than just the 3 variables right here, using the probability in your 99 could be useful. So let's say we're doing a 99% confidence interval, or so the 99 could be useful there. And I think P1 might be 1, 2. Yep, so that's the first percentile. And we have the 10th percentile. So those could all be useful. And then P, I think 5, maybe 1. Yep, so if we're doing a 90%, 95%, or 90 percentile right here, this will be useful too for a confidence interval. So knowing there are other ones. So, and of course, you could go into SAS documentation for the proc means to get that into, or find out all the possible ones there. So that's going to be it for this video. Email me if you have any questions, and look for the next video. I'll send out an email after this one, and I'll be creating another video, but let me know if there's anything after I've posted the videos that you are still confused on.